Hello, LIVN TRUTH community. Welcome back to the LIVN TRUTH podcast. I know we've been gone for a little bit. We have missed you guys. Hopefully you have missed us as well. I am your producer, Sean. I am joined by our host,
Nafaya.
And I know she just spoke for a second there, but I'm sure you heard a little bit of scratchiness in the voice. The reason we've been gone for the last couple of weeks is because us two and our families and the other people working here with us at LIVN TRUTH have been heavily affected by COVID-19. Me and Nafaya both tested positive. And even my father was exposed to COVID-19. He didn't end up testing positive, but he was exposed to it while he was off on a work trip, out of the state. So both internally and externally, we've all been really affected, and we've had a rough go of it for the past couple of weeks. I handled it comparatively pretty well, but you'll hear in Nafaya's voice that it's been a little bit rougher for some of us than others.
And Sean is correct. For me, I did not have any of the normal COVID-19 symptoms. What happened with me is I ended up with more of a bronchitis, so more of a cough with chest discomfort. No other symptoms were apparent. And as Sean stated, it spread pretty fast through our immediate community and those that we are around.
Yeah, and for me, myself personally, I think I had more of the standard COVID symptoms. I had a really rough go for about 36 hours. I pretty much was asleep for about a whole day. And then I really struggled with the fatigue and the muscle aching. I had a cough and some cold symptoms as well, but nothing as severe as what you experienced or what my partner, who also ended up testing positive, experienced.
Yes. And as I explained what happened to me, I am double vaccinated and boosted. And when I got my second vaccination, I felt like I was totally fine. And then all of a sudden, I just felt severely fatigued. Like I had to sit down immediately. I was very weak. I slept for a couple of hours. When I woke up, I felt fine. That was the same way I felt this time. I was totally fine. I actually had a slight cough prior to realizing that I was exposed to COVID-19. The next day, I felt the same exact way as I felt when I got that second vaccination. Severely fatigued all of a sudden, had to lay down, had to be still. I did just that. When I got up, I was fine, other than experiencing a severe cough and laryngitis for the past 2 weeks.
And I'd just like to say we are all testing negatively now. We're all feeling much better. It may not sound that way, but I can assure you that the voices you hear coming over your headphones or however you're listening right now are in a much better state than they were about 5 days ago when they were pretty much more or less non-existent.
And again, I never felt bad for more than 24. I wouldn't even say 24 hours. I do contribute that to the way I eat and to the way I take care of myself. I think that my nutrition, how I care for my body, my environment allowed me to push through this and not be as severely impacted as some of those that did also have it, as well as not get the severe symptoms and be over them in just a few hours.
And I'll just double down on that and say I think how I was eating and drinking heavily affected how well I was able to move through it as well. Not that I am on as strict of a nutrition plan as you are. However, when I look back and try and find the silver lining, the COVID really did sort of ruin my appetite. So that kept me away from, one, I only drank water the entire time that I was, really feeling down in the dumps. More so, my lack of appetite kept me away from, maybe snacking on some things that I probably really shouldn't, in the first place, and even eating some things that I probably really even shouldn't in the first place. So there were some positives, in it, or I guess you could look at it that way. And I think that did really positively affect how quickly I was able to move through it and sort of, get on the other side of it.
And I'm glad you brought up the point of appetite. And excuse me, you all, if you hear me clear my throat, I do still have some residual effects of this. But I'm glad you talked about appetite. Today, we're going to discuss how COVID-19 impacts people with diabetes, but also the appetite. As Sean stated, he only drank water. He didn't drink soda. He didn't drink other things, water to help flush your system. And I stayed strict on my diet. It did affect my appetite a little bit, but I continued to stay in alignment with my nutrition. So when I woke up in the morning, I would drink my 20 to 30 ounces of water. I would eat my fruit. I would fix some herbal tea to help with the cough and the scratchiness in my voice. Throughout the day, I didn't eat as heavy as I normally would, meaning I might only have a salad with cucumbers and tomatoes versus a salad and some quinoa and maybe hummus and avocado. I didn't eat those heavier proteins, but I stayed in alignment with what my nutrition would normally be to help fuel me and give me strength to fight off the impact that COVID-19 can have on your body.
So let's get into it. So, like you just said, we are going to be focused today on diabetes and how that can affect you, if you are to, pick up an illness like COVID-19. I was just reading this morning and obviously through discussing with you that people with prediabetes, but also type 1, type 2, or gestational, even when those diabetic symptoms are being well managed, they're at a much higher risk for developing complications or, what can be considered flu-like or cold-like complications, which can result in things like hospitalization or, even having a higher risk of not surviving an illness like COVID-19. And, some things that can pop up are something like you experience, bronchitis, other things like sinus infections, pneumonia, other things like that.
Correct. Your risk of getting sick from COVID-19 is so much lower if your diabetes is well managed. Viral infections increase inflammation, internal swelling, and things like that with people with diabetes. That additional inflammation and swelling can be caused by blood sugars that are higher than normal. And so that inflammation contributes to more severe complications. And a point I want to make right now before we go any further, and we should have said this at the top of the segment, is that this virus is constantly changing. It is constantly mutating. It's mutating so fast that science can't keep up with what's happening. So as we all know that Omicron was the original virus and the current predominant variant is BA5. Right now, BA5 is responsible for greater than 50% of the cases in the US as of July of this year. And then there's also BA4, which is responsible for about 17 to 20% of the cases of COVID. These variants are so much better at evading the protection of the vaccines and even exposure to previous infection, and they cause more severe disease. So what I want to say regarding that is that COVID-19 is not gone. And even those of us who are double vaccinated and boosted, some people are double boosted and triple boosted, we're still at risk because of the mutation factor of these variants. So it's important that we continue to be vigilant in protecting ourselves, wearing our mask when we're out, washing our hands, and even in our small circles. We here at Live in Truth have a very small circle of people. We're not out visiting. We're not generally in big groups. It's generally our small circle. And within that circle, we still got sick. Of course, we're doing our daily activities, but we still need to be vigilant in protecting ourselves, wearing our mask, washing our hands, and not doing any activities that you truly don't have to do because you can still be exposed.
And I agree widely with everything you're saying. However, you touched on COVID-19 hasn't gone anywhere. It is still here. I would like to carry on and say I am under the impression that it is not going anywhere, and it will be something that, the world will just have to learn how to work with and be prepared for, like some of the other illnesses we go to. Like Nafaya said, we don't do a whole lot of unnecessary extracurriculars. However, speaking for myself personally, understanding that this is something that is a part of the world now and a part of existence, I have, attempted in some capacities to get back to, what a normal life of enjoyment looked like for me pre-pandemic. So I have been to some outdoor activities. I was at a soccer game, a month ago or something like that. So it's difficult. It's a difficult thing to navigate, protecting yourself, protecting others, but still trying to return to normalcy and do the things that keep you going and that you love to do. Even something as simple as, walking out on the beach or something like that.
And as Sean stated, we're trying to get back to quote unquote normal. And I don't believe that we'll ever get back to what was our previous norm. And we have to adapt to this new norm, which again is a higher level of vigilance and a greater respect for this illness that we don't seem to be able to get control over. And I'm a great advocate for us still, backing off and being cautious, especially for people who experience chronic illness and chronic disease. As you all should know by now, I am very passionate about the diabetic community because myself, I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic. And so that when people are sick with this type of infection, they just have increased risk. And one of those increased risk is diabetic ketoacidosis, which can be life-threatening. This is generally experienced by people with type 1 diabetes. And that can just make it more challenging to manage your fluid intake, your electrolyte levels, all of that. But also, as Sean talked about, that your appetite. People with diabetes have to manage their nutrition very strictly. And when you're sick, you're unable to do that. So if you don't have an appetite because you've contracted COVID-19, what's going to happen? Your blood sugar is going to drop. Or you're trying to restore your fluids or manage dehydration and you're drinking sugary fluids, which increases your risk of increased blood sugar. So it's just important. It's very important that people with diabetes, pre-diabetes, and any other chronic illness really, really protect themselves from this invisible disease that is constantly mutating, that's not going anywhere anytime soon, and even that's affecting the healthiest people in our communities.
And obviously, we're focused on COVID-19, but as far as these chronic illnesses goes, it is just very critical that if you're suffering with a chronic lifestyle illness to be diligent and take as much care of yourself as you can, because any of these, even the flu, any illness that you pick up on top of the chronic lifestyle illness you're already dealing with, that will just exacerbate, whatever comes on top of that.
Correct. And I mentioned diabetic ketoacidosis, which usually comes on pretty slowly. Some early symptoms that you might recognize is thirst or very dry mouth. With COVID-19 symptoms, and this is the hard part, we talk about recognizing the difference between the two in one of our previous segments, the difference between just feeling bad and something associated with your diabetes diagnosis. So with diabetic ketoacidosis, you have thirst or very dry mouth. I had this horrible cough for 2 weeks. And so I was constantly thirsty and I had a very dry mouth. But what also continues to happen is one of the classic signs of diabetes is frequent urination, high blood sugar, and high levels of ketones in your urine. High levels of ketones poisons your system, which leads to sepsis, which can lead to a coma and even death. So with this, if you start vomiting, you're feeling tired, your skin is dry, you have flushed skin, you have abdominal pain, and that emesis continues, you need to get emergency help. You have difficulty breathing. Another classic sign of diabetic ketoacidosis is a fruity smelling breath. If your breath smells fruity or sweet, someone says that, that's another sign. You start to get confused, it's hard time paying attention. You might want to seek emergency attention immediately because it can lead to death. And it's unfortunate that with COVID-19, you have some of these same symptoms. So you have to know the difference. So I'm going to go over again some classic symptoms of diabetic ketoacidosis: that fruity smelling breath, high levels of ketones in your urine, confusion, dry or flushed skin, severe vomiting that's irretractable. Those are some symptoms that are very different from COVID-19 and something you would seek emergency attention for.
I want to go back to, staying in line with your nutritional needs and nutritional plans. We talk about how COVID-19 can lead to a pretty severe loss of appetite. What are some of your recommendations? Obviously, a lot of it is discipline and going to be maybe forcing your body and yourself to do something that it doesn't really feel like doing. You talked about how you didn't necessarily eat maybe as densely or as heavily as you otherwise would, but still stayed in line with your nutritional plan. What's some of your advice for people dealing with this on how they can also stay within, their own, line of nutrition, even when they're feeling that severe loss of appetite?
The first thing that I'm going to talk about is staying hydrated. Drink lots of water and good herbal tea. All herbal tea is not good tea. You need to read the labels. Lots of water. Fluid helps to flush out all of the virus. It'll help get it out. You're urinating. It'll help break up the mucus in your lungs so you can cough it out and spit that out. So staying hydrated. Again, when I wake up every morning, and I continue to do this even now, and I did while I was down, the first thing I would do was drink 20 to 30 ounces of room temperature or warm water. Most days I had been adding lemon into it and agave nectar to help with my voice. Second, I would advise that you eat fruit that's light. And most fruit also contains a high level of water to help you to continue to flush. Salad with dressing that does not contain lots of oil. Again, oil kind of clogs the system. So salads, lighter meals, brown rices with light seasonings. Trying a big thing that I do. I'm going to get better at helping you all as a community by showing you what I do is meal planning. So right now, my go-to have been chili, which I cooked last week, vegan chili. It has a little spice into it. It is heavier, but that is something that you can eat. Anything that has a spice will help you cough out and sweat out any illness that's in your body. So that was something else that was a go-to for me when I didn't feel good. It is a little bit heavier, but you want to try and eat where I would suggest eating about 5 light meals a day. When you're sick, you generally don't want to eat. You need to force yourself to eat about minimum 3 meals a day, 3 small meals a day containing fruit, containing green vegetables, lots of fluid. Even at this time, I suggest cutting out even the plant-based milks, the thicker milks, anything that's thick and heavy, that will kind of clog you up a little bit as well.
And I second that, just to reiterate some of what I was saying earlier, I went with a lot of water, a lot of light fruit. You just talked about, thicker plant-based milk. I usually only drink oat milk anyway. So I was able to continue that, which is a very light alternative milk. It is not very heavy or very thick. And yeah, just to agree with everything you're saying, and eating that way and drinking that way really did assist me to not be down in the dumps for too long, or as long as some of the other people around me who got sick right around the same time I did. I was able to recover much faster. And even when I was really in the midst of it, it didn't seem like my lowest point was quite as low as some of the people who were affected around me.
Well, it's important that, first, I would like to say food itself will not prevent you from contracting coronavirus or cure the disease. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that your nutrition will help support your immune health if you do get COVID-19. So you want to consume foods with antioxidants and anti-inflammatory properties. And again, that's why, as Sean said, the way we eat helped us to push through this probably better than anybody around us. Again, I felt bad for less than 24 hours. And it felt just like when I was exposed directly to the vaccine, not the virus. Let me clarify, the vaccine does not contain the virus. So I felt the same way I felt when I got the vaccine. So some additional foods that will help boost your immune system and help decrease that inflammation is foods that are high in vitamin D. That can include fortified orange juice, wild mushrooms. If you all follow me at all, you know I am big on cooking mushrooms. I love mushrooms, and they are very high in vitamin D. Of course, getting out in the sun. Go sit on your porch. I'm not saying go be with a group of people, but go sit on your porch. Go walk in your yard. Foods that are red, that are green, that are yellow, that are orange. So those are peppers and apples and your leafy greens. All of those foods contain carotenoids, and they are all antioxidants. You can find those foods in algae, so your sea moss, in fungi, which is mushrooms, all of your plants and vegetables. These should all be included in your diet when you are not feeling well. Your foods with vitamin A, they are your anti-inflammatory foods. And those include your sweet potatoes, your carrots, your collard greens, your spinach. Another good food, and we talked about this last podcast when we talked about diabetes below the belt, dark chocolate, not a low percentage, a very high percentage of dark chocolate, your cashew nuts, your hemp seeds and your pumpkin seeds, your beans, lentils, and sprouts. Those foods are good for you and high in zinc when you are not feeling well and you're dealing with a virus such as COVID-19.
I have a question for you regarding the severity of your symptoms when it comes to COVID-19. I have not been diagnosed with any chronic illnesses. I don't believe that I have any underlying that I don't know about. You have reversed your pre-diabetic diagnosis. We both agree that we had a much easier time while we did experience COVID-19, and we had a rough go. For yourself, you said 24 hours. Mine was more between 30 and 36 hours, my really rough period. But we both had a easier go than some of those around us. I know COVID-19 there are so many different variants, and obviously, we're all individuals. It's going to present itself in people, slightly differently. Can having a very rough time with COVID-19 and very severe symptoms, could that possibly be a sign that maybe you had an underlying illness or chronic illness or something that was already there that perhaps you didn't know about? If it lasts for weeks and things are popping up, like you're having trouble breathing, you're getting some of those flu-like symptoms, bronchitis, pneumonia, things like that. Can that be a sign that perhaps, just like how we spoke about with sexual health, sometimes people recognize the sexual dysfunction before they recognize the chronic illness. Could a similar sort of logic apply here, or is COVID something that really does just affect everyone differently regardless of what else you've got going on?
The severity of COVID-19 can range from mild to severe. I cannot honestly say that if your symptoms are severe with COVID-19 that you might have a chronic disease. It just affects people different. There are people who've had COVID-19 and didn't have any symptoms, and that's what we call asymptomatic. And there are people who no health history at all who was hit by COVID-19 very hard. So I can't honestly say that a severe bout of COVID-19 might be evidence of a chronic illness. I don't think that's good to say. But generally, in the research and what we've seen over the last several years, those with the severe symptoms, those who have died from COVID-19, those who have had what we call long COVID, unfortunately, did have a chronic illness that they were dealing with. But I don't want to say personally that severe symptoms is caused by a current chronic illness. But what the evidence showed is those with chronic illnesses or those who perished from the disease did have one or more chronic lifestyle illnesses.
Sure. And not that I'm asking you, but I would be curious myself, and I'll look it up when we're done recording to see if there are numbers on the people who were asymptomatic when it comes to COVID-19. What percentage of those people, if it's even reported, had an underlying chronic illness, or, you know, if that was even the case, if you could be asymptomatic and diabetic, or, you know, have another one of these different illnesses.
And this is Nafaya speaking. I am not referencing any research. I am just going based on my experience, which again is over 20 years, and my knowledge. If you have a chronic illness, any type of chronic illness, you are probably not going to be asymptomatic. It is unlikely that you are asymptomatic if you have some type of chronic illness, because even cold or flu, even allergies affect those who have chronic illnesses more severely than those who don't.
And before we wrap up, I just want to reiterate again, I just saw a breaking news article from the county that we're stationed in right now saying, even though we are seeing confirmed cases drop, and, you know, perhaps we've gone from high alert to medium alert, the county's just released a statement in an article saying, you know, please do not let your guard down, stay vigilant, you know, look out for others, look out for yourself, because it is not going away. It is still here. It is still changing. And, you know, people are still dying, getting very sick. So, as we said, you know, at the top of the podcast, COVID's here. It does not seem like it's going anywhere. Certainly not anytime soon. So, even though we are doing our best to return to quote unquote normal life, remember that things are serious. You know, remember that things are very serious, and even outside of COVID, you know, there are all sorts of, you know, things to be looking out for.
Absolutely. This is a serious illness, a very serious illness. You know, we understand that people didn't think it was serious in the beginning. People didn't believe that it was real. And even today, after all of the death and still the increase in hospitalizations, we are still getting people to say that it's a hoax.
And I'd also just like to add that, you know, everybody, scientists, doctors, and non-scientists and doctors, everybody sort of got their own opinion on what is really the best way to prevent transmission, you know, what mandates work or don't work, or, you know, if masks are as you as effective, as reported or not. So, everybody's got differing opinions, whether you believe it or not. Even within the people who believe in COVID and the severity, those people have very differing opinions on what works to prevent the transmission and things like that.
So as Sean was talking about, there are all of these different treatment, what works, what doesn't work. Our internal team is working on some things here that'll be coming out soon. I think you guys will enjoy, and I will rant about some of these things that work, that don't work, and just health things in general that are completely ridiculous. But one of the top most ridiculous things, I think, in my opinion, is this ivermectin for COVID-19. Back on a serious note here. COVID-19 is a serious illness, you all. As you all know, individuals who are older are at higher risk for this illness, and their risk of dying is higher. People who have existing medical conditions are also at higher risk for this illness and are at higher risk of dying if they contract COVID-19. Medical conditions that increase the seriousness of the illness include many lifestyle diseases such as heart disease, coronary artery disease, type 1 and type 2 diabetes, being overweight or obese, high blood pressure, smoking, kidney disease, diseases that are not considered lifestyle diseases, but are definitely directed by your lifestyle. Diseases such as cancer, sickle cell disease, asthma, all of these categories that I just named put you at increased risk for a severer bout of COVID-19 and a higher risk of dying if you contract COVID-19. That the list is not an end all be all. I just named a few off the top of my head. So again, even if you have a healthy pregnancy, which is not an illness at all, you are at higher risk of a more serious illness. Those with dementia who might not even be outside exposed to other people, they are at higher risk of severe illness and death. Again, this is serious, and we need to take COVID-19 very serious.
And it is serious for the perfectly healthy and perfectly able. This is not a old person's illness virus. This is not an old person's virus. This is not a already immunocompromised person's virus. Everyone is at risk. Everyone can be very seriously affected. Obviously, there is some added risk if you are dealing with something else, but I would just like to emphasize that even for a person in my position, I am finely abled. I am generally healthy. I'm youthful. This affects us too. It is not something to ignore or pretend like, isn't happening for people in your sphere.
Absolutely. So today we thought it very important, since my voice was clear enough to understand, to get this information out that even when you're healthy, even when you have good nutrition, you're in the best physical health of your life, this is something that can still affect you. However, when your nutrition is good and you are in the best physical health, it doesn't affect you as bad. It did affect my voice. However, I do like my voice, y'all. I think I sound like Beyonce. What do you all think? Check it out. Let us know if you think I sound like Beyonce when I talk, because I think I do.
All righty, guys. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the LIVN TRUTH podcast. Stay safe. Think about yourself. Think about others. And hopefully we can all stay healthy and come out on the other side of this thing. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Don't kiss strangers.
Don't kiss strangers.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you all for joining us for another episode of the LIVN TRUTH podcast. Get connected with all things LIVN TRUTH by checking out our webpage, livntruth.org, and follow us at livn.truth on Instagram and at LIVN TRUTH on all other platforms. Stay tuned for next week's episode. Schedule your consultation with Nafaya today and start living an intentional life of vitality through nutrition.